Welcome to Plaquemine, Louisiana. When I began to live and work here, I really did not know much about this town. So I've made it my business to reach out and explore. I call them going on adventures. So in my adventures, I have discovered and learned a lot about this town. And I'd like to show you some of those things. So if you'd like to see them, won't you come along, follow me. So I'm standing on top of a levee that's approximately 15 miles south of downtown Baton Rouge, and behind me is the Mississippi River. See it back there? It's the mighty Mississippi, old man's river, old muddy. That river could talk, it could tell some stories. Speaking of stories, there's a lot of history in this area. In the year 1699, a man by the name of Pierre Lemoyne d'Iberville sailed up this river and claimed all this territory for King Louis XIV of France. And right along this river somewhere, he had a military post built, and surrounding that military post were trees called persimmon trees. They produced a fruit called persimmon fruit, and the Native American word for the persimmon is Plaquemine. So they named the outpost Plaquemine, and that's how the town got its name, Plaquemine. So now those natives that were living in this area, they were the peaceful Chitimacha tribe. But by 1775, which is just 1 year before the Declaration of Independence was signed, there was a permanent European settlement here. And this was before this land was even part of the United States. It wasn't until 1803 that the Louisiana Purchase took place, where this area was purchased from Napoleon and became part of the United States. So 1775, 28 years before this became even part of the United States, there was a permanent European settlement here. But it belonged to France, and this territory before that went back and forth between Spain and France several times until it finally became an American state. Well, this was a strategic spot here because it was at the juncture of the Mississippi River and Bayou Plaquemine, so this area prospered and grew during that time. And then you get into the antebellum age, the antebellum era, where they produced sugar and the economy began to boom. You had all these plantation homes that were massive plantation homes that were close by. You had the St. Louis plantation, you had Nottoway plantation, you had Belgrove plantation. They were all nearby producing all that sugar, and the economy was booming and Plaquemine was growing. Then later in the mid-18th century, the lumber industry began to boom. They began to cut all the virgin cypress trees in this area. The landscape looked completely different back then. You had forest and forest of huge cypress, and they would go back into the bayous and in the Chafalaya Basin, and they would cut down all these cypress trees and bring them here to the sawmills in Plaquemine. And during that time, they said that they produced about 1.5 million feet board from cypress trees here in Plaquemine, Louisiana, in their sawmills. So, you know, this town has a lot of history. It's got a lot of character to it. And behind me here is the historic district. You can see it back there. You can see over one shoulder, you see the lock house of the old Plaquemine locks. Over my other shoulder, you can see the bell tower of the Catholic Church. And if I turn back around to the river again, you can see a tugboat pushing barges down the river. Now, in the latest census, which was in 2010, there were a little over 7,000 people living in Plaquemine. And the interesting thing about that is 49% of that population is white and 49% is black. So it's a very even population of coexistence between white and black people. So I'm standing where boats once passed from the Mississippi River to access Bayou Plaquemine. which is right behind me. You can see the bayou back there. And the Mississippi River, as I turn around, you can see where it's been filled in when they closed these locks and made it part of the levee system. So they began construction in 1895. They thought it would take about 3 years, but it actually took 14, and it wasn't completed till about 1909. And this was a very busy lock. It accessed all of the Atchafalaya Basin, and it became a very important cog in the industry and the economy here in Plaquemine. And so this lock house behind me is now a museum. So let's go inside of it. The lock house is beautiful and unique. It's become a landmark of Plaquemine. It was built with a Dutch influence style, with gleaming white tile and massive circular windows. Well, the river has a higher water stage than the bayou, so it would be closed in one end or the other so that boats could enter into the lock. And when the doors would close behind them, and the water level would either raise or lower depending on which direction they were going. When the water level matched the river or the bayou, the doors would open and the boats would exit. This was truly an engineering marvel. So I'm with Stan inside the lock house, and Stan is a tour guide here. So Stan, tell us a little bit about the lock house.
Yeah, well, this lock house here was the powerhouse. It had all the machines that was used to open and close the big lock gates and lift the valves to the tunnel system. And where we're in now was the boiler room, where they had the big boilers that boiled the water, that made the steam that ran the lock. And then you had the machine room, lockmaster's office, and upstairs was your radio room. A lot of people don't know this, but this lock was the highest freshwater lift lock in the world when it was built. And it was designed by the same man who later designed the locks at the Panama Canal. So it was really an engineering marvel of its time, and we were lucky that it was saved. The last boat came through here in '61, and they wanted to put a highway through here, but a local man saved it. And then in the early '80s, it became what we are today, one of 18 state historic sites in Louisiana.
That's great. You know, if you're ever looking for something to do in Plaquemine, I'd recommend you come here and check this place out. Let's stand and show you around. Across the street from the Plaquemine Locks Complex is this Greek Revival building that was built in 1848 as the first Iberville Parish Courthouse, and it housed that courthouse until 1906. It was then used as the Plaquemine City Hall from 1906 to 1985. Now it's home to the Iberville Museum. So let's go inside. It's simply amazing to think that this room was once a 19th century courtroom. If walls could talk, these walls could truly tell some stories. Now it's full of artifacts of the history of Iberville Parish. So I'm with Megan inside the Iberville Museum. She's the director and curator of this museum. So Megan, tell us a little bit about this museum.
So the Iberville Museum has been open for nearly 20 years. It was a community-driven museum, and it was founded by a group of volunteers. Most of the objects that we have here are on loan from members of the community and represents veterans, early industry in Iberville Parish. And then we have a brand new exhibit on the Atchafalaya Basin that focuses on how people lived in the swamp. So you should come visit us. We are open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 4, and our admission is $5. So, yeah. Great.
Hey, Megan, tell us one more thing, because I saw a big exhibit in there about boxing. What's the story about that?
Yeah, so Plaquemine High was a really well-known boxing high school, and so the Boxing Hall of Fame is actually here in Plaquemine.
Across the street from the Iberville Museum is the St. John the Evangelist Catholic Church. The original wooden church was built on this spot in 1850, but 7 years later it burned down. A new building replaced it, but it was damaged from the construction of the locks and from storms that hit the area. So by the early 1900s, it was structurally damaged and needed to be replaced. So it was torn down and replaced with the current building that was finished in 1926. It was nicknamed the Cathedral on the Bayou. The huge Roman basilica-style church is 70 feet wide by 250 feet long and is considered the purest example of Italian Romanesque architecture in the entire South. So let's go inside. Next door to the church is St. John's School, which provided an education for boys. This building was completed in 1910 and was used until 1960 when a new school was opened that combined these boys and the girls from St. Basil's Academy. St. Basil's Academy is across the street from the old St. John's School. It was originally built as a mansion in 1847, but was turned into a Catholic school for girls and the home of the Maronite Sisters of the Holy Cross. They were here from 1859 to 1862 and then from 1865 to 1975. During that gap of time, it was occupied by the Union Army as a military command. Across the street from St. Basil's Academy is the Freeman Home. It's typical of a mid-1800s colonial raised cottage, and it was built in 1850. A few steps away from the Freeman home is this 3-story Queen Anne home. It was built in 1895. It has encircling 2-story galleries and features elaborate millwork. This house is across from the parking lot of the Catholic Church. It might be the oldest house in Plaquemine. It was built on a Spanish land grant before 1842, and it was damaged by cannon fire during the Civil War. This block of Eden Street has several interesting buildings. At the corner is the Roth Building. Over the years, it's had retail stores, a furniture store, and restaurants. Next is Barker's Pharmacy, which is the oldest pharmacy in the state, dating to 1885. And then the People's Bank Building dating to 1899. And just past the People's Bank Building is this large building, which was originally built as a post office in 1935, and now they sell yard ornaments out of it. The next is the Bruley Building, built in 1889. Now it's a law firm and a private residence. Inside the old Roth Building on that corner is Cabos Mexican Restaurant. It's my favorite place to eat in Plaquemine because of the good Mexican food, friendly people, and this beautiful historical building. I love the ceiling in here. I'm told that these stairs once led to a brothel on the second floor in years past. But when I go to the restroom at Cabos, this masked wrestler is eye to eye with me in my personal space. Just one block away is this very cool building that was built in 1926 as the Plaquemine Railroad Depot. Later, it served as the city police station from 1968 to 1996. Now it's called the Depot Market, where you can find arts, crafts, and antiques. And when you go inside, it has a great vibe to the place. Look at the building while browsing through the merchandise, and you can just imagine the activity of years gone by. I could picture travelers, railroad employees, then police officers and detectives. So I'm standing here outside the old Plaquemine Depot, and you can see the railroad track right behind me. When I turn this way, you can see the depot itself. But what I wanted to show you out here is this door over my shoulder. At the time this was built, and this was ran in the early 1900s, it was a time of segregation, unfortunately. And the colored people had to go through that door to go to the restroom. That was their restroom right there. The City Hall was built in 1906 as the parish government building that served as the Iberville Parish Courthouse from 1906 to 1985. It was once called the Great Temple of Justice. Now it houses the Plaquemine City Hall. I'm outside the current Plaquemine City Hall, and behind me over my shoulder is a memorial erected in memory of the soldiers of Iberville Parish from 1861 to 1865. This monument was erected in 1912. So let's go take a closer look. So far, everything I've shown you today is in the historic district, which is all within 1 square mile. Well, now we're back into the Garden District, and I want to show you one last place today, the old Plaquemine School. It was built in 1931, then the gym was added in 1937. It was designed for boxing matches, which was a popular high school sport in the mid-1900s. The school closed in 1993 when the new Plaquemine High School was opened. And this is the old football stadium and track called the Copac. It's where I go to exercise since I only live 2 blocks away.
What really think about Plaquemine is its close proximity to Baton Rouge. And speaking of Baton Rouge, I'm going to sign off for this segment of Chad's Adventures and watch this game. So go Tigers!